an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Children of Divinity Book 3, Ascend, chapters 9.5-ish through 11. In these chapters, we finished the assault of the Spears facility, and it turns out that Brian isn't even at that facility. He's at Spears' house. So there is no danger of running in. And none of this went how I expected. They just get out of there. They get out, and Spears is screwed. And I love this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. And Heather is here on the chat. Yay. So, yeah, you guys know I had like a full expectation that they were going to have to stumble across Brian at some point. But it turns out, I forget about like how many different places Spears has running at once. And we've also seen that he does experimentation on subjects that aren't even in the same building with him. Like, I think that's what we saw in the second book, or maybe the first one. There was a scene where I was unclear about where he was relative to the person he was experimenting on. And Heather pointed out that it was like a remote facility. And so I should have sort of like realized that that was a possibility, but I think I assumed that the remote facilities, it was just because he couldn't get to them. And that if Brian was right in front of him, then it would be, he'd bring him somewhere nearby. I didn't really think about where, you know what I'm saying? And apparently, Brian is still alive. And there is a moment where Dr. Spears is sort of like, I low-key want to kill that motherfucker because fuck Jordan. But he doesn't because he thinks Brian will be useful. And I'm extremely curious about what that could mean, because Brian is left behind, it seems, at the location that Spears is in when he finds everything out, and Spears flees. So if he still thinks that Brian could potentially be useful, I don't really love that that's even a possibility to him, because to me that means that he knows something about either an effect that the awakening process is going to have that will make Brian beholden to him somehow, or he's just planning to somehow like manipulate Brian or potentially use Brian against Jordan. It depends what he's able to set up here. That's my main question, because if I were Dr. Spears, I would try and set up a sort of like booby trap, because I would like expect Jordan to start coming for her husband. But I don't know how aware he is of their ability to find out where his real home is. So he may be really convinced that Brian isn't at risk, that they won't find him. And I don't think that if Jenna is offline, that she's not offline, but, like, essentially, she's, like, out of commission right now. He might not be able to set up a booby trap because I would assume it would be something technologically based, without Jenna being functional. So, I don't know. But clearly the whole thing isn't finished. Brian is still he's in the middle of the process. I want him to get through. I just want to see what happens. I want to see what Brian could do. I want to see what effect it has had. I hope he's okay. I truly do. I think I've mentioned it before, but medical experimentation is one of those things that really gets to me in terms of the concept of it in horror stories, and just in general, the idea of people being manipulated on a level that is so invasive, where they're being violated in such a way. And a lot of times it will be like allegedly for the sake of science and knowledge, but in the moment it really feels like, no, it's because this motherfucker's a sadist, or, you know, they just misunderstand so deeply what's going on. Like, you know, historically we didn't understand mental illness. And so there were all kinds of horrific treatments to deal with mental illnesses because we didn't understand how they worked or what was going on. And it was allegedly for your own good. No, it wasn't. So this sort of thing, the potential for the directions that it could go in is, it could be really ugly. And it all really sort of depends what this author is intending to do. And I don't think that he would just have something go terribly wrong and now Brian is simply like this disfigured, weird freak that can't, you know what I mean? I don't think that's the direction that these books would go in, but I don't know for sure. I genuinely am not certain. There's so much about what Dr. Spears said that he could do for Brian, and I don't understand half of that either. So who knows? But I'm getting ahead of myself as usual, because first we have to get out of the facility. And we pick up in the middle of the chapter, like I ended last time at the spot where the asterisks are dividing the chapter. And we start with Viper here. And she is being attacked by drones at a rate that she very quickly is sort of like, wait, what the fuck? How are there so many of these? And eventually, one of them shoots her with a dart. And she realizes that there is a huge amount of this sedative in it because Dr. Spears set this up knowing about what her metabolism was like. And essentially just like, this has been tailored to capture her specifically. And that realization really like gave me chills. I really hated that for her. So I'm going to, let's see. 10 shots fired, 10 drones lay in ruins. Pain exploded in her side and she saw a dart the size of a pencil sticking out of her costume. A wave of disorientation washed over her and she clumsily avoided an electrical discharge from the same drone, though she fell against an empty lab unit in the process. As quickly as her metabolism had spread the sedative, it dispersed the worst of the effects and Viper pushed to her feet. Pain exploded in the back of her left thigh as another of the chemical darts struck it. Few of the drones were struck when she shot, but the ones that were tumbled to the ground. Her entire leg was numb. The doses the drones were using would have killed an ordinary person instantly, but her regeneration would burn off the most poisons or drugs. She felt her arm fall uselessly to her side and felt consciousness start to leave her. Normal methods for determining proper dosage wouldn't work for someone with a hypermetabolic rate like she had. The drones were systematically dosing her with a progressive concentration, wearing down her regenerative abilities until they could physically subdue her. Then Jordan came to the realization that Spears had figured out who the woman behind the mask was. Viper imagined Spears smiling down at her with that arrogant, superior look full of lechery and lust. She wasn't certain if it was the mental picture of Spears or the drugs which made her skin crawl, though even that sensation started to fade. Stars collected at the edges of her vision, and Viper heard the familiar oscillating hum of several drones crowding around her. And what I enjoy about this is that as she begins to lose consciousness, like we're still in her point of view, so all of a sudden everything like sort of shakes and she's sort of feeling like a weird pressure on her front and she's like, what in the fuck is going on? And she wakes up enough to see that she's like draped over Scorp's shoulder and he is carrying her. And I love when he says Scorp and he just says, welcome back. I'm getting us out of here. So eventually the drugs begin to wear off. And let's see. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Put me down. I'd like to at least be on my feet for this. He carefully set Viper on her feet, but kept an arm around her until she was ready enough to stand on her own. What are they waiting for? Viper shook her head and watched as several dozens of the anti-intruder drones floated in the hallway. I don't know. I'm going to buy you some time. They're trying to take me alive. You get out and you come find me. You can barely stand. I am not leaving you behind. I appreciate the chivalry, but we don't have time to go round about this. I'm going to charge in. You break through. That's not going to happen. You take the right, I take the left. We go together or not at all. And then we have this moment where she says, you're stubborn. He says, pot, meat, kettle. And they look at each other and she just says, you're lucky I'm married. And this is a real moment of like admitting the vibe that's happening between the two of them in a way that they haven't addressed it. It's been clear that it's there. And there is the moment where he like tried to kiss her or was about to, but it never has been put into words. And at one point he picks her up again and she says, a gentleman usually asks permission. And he says, who says I'm a gentleman? And I was like, that's a good answer though. That honestly is a good answer. Like it says she felt giddy again and knew it wasn't the drugs. And I'm like, I bet it isn't. Because if I said something like that and a guy responded with that and a little bit of an arched eyebrow and a look, I'd just be like, okay. I just, a man who knows how to properly flirt, that's a rare thing. Like a lot of men think they know how to flirt, but really they're just like sexually harassing you. And a guy who is good at the little suggestion and then backs off from it, it takes a kind of restraint and creativity of mind and wit. And it's rare. It just is. So they step outside and they see all of these like security cars that are labeled with the Imagine logo, and they are fucked up. One of the cars was on its side and another had its front end smashed to half of its normal thickness. Steam was spewing from a broke radiator, and one of the headlights was dangling from its wires. Over 20 men of varying ages were sitting on the ground in line, handcuffed to one another, the pistols and shotguns piled nearby. Stryker looked up as he finished securing the last man and smiled. Good. Glad you didn't make me have to come all the way back down there to rescue you. So this is just such a great moment. I was not sure what they were going to come out to. You know, like I said, was so sure that eventually there would be like a run-in and they would wind up getting pinned or something and they wouldn't be able to get out of here. And everything is just so under control. And like all of the drones just drop because Ryan has all of that figured out too. But Viper notices that even when that's happened, the stuff for like life support is still on. So, you know, that is being managed as well. So at this point, Scorp looks behind him and realizes that, I think that happened earlier actually, but Whip Scorpion is like recovering and Scorp has this moment of like, motherfucker, he didn't used to heal this fast. I don't like it. And they get out of there. They had something to take Spears out of play, at least. No doubt he'd try to go into hiding, but with the evidence they had on the hook, he wouldn't be able to show his face in public. Interpol could freeze Spears' assets and make him the most wanted man on the planet. It was a step in the right direction, and hopefully it would rob Aftermath of the resources he had been using to fund his attacks. Aegis had recaptured the initiative. That is delightful. So then we go to Spears and we get to see how he reacts to everything. This is so good. So he comes down to his office and the lights are not as bright as he's used to. And he assumes that Karen turned them down when she left, doesn't really think anything of it. And he is really fucking feeling himself about the woman that he is sleeping with, Lena, who is Brian's secretary, right? And just keeps thinking about how, like, oh, she is... Heather says assistant, which is funny because that is, like, the response that a lot of women have to being called secretary. So I appreciate that kind of correction. It's assistant with a period. But yeah, he's thinking about how, like, occasionally she displayed the annoying petulance and emotional neediness he found distasteful in human females. And this was sort of interesting. I'm going to get to that in a second. But yeah, he's just like, the sex is absolutely wild, though. So that is super fun. And then he thinks about how things are going to be set up once he has, like, taken over. And he says when he was sitting on the throne of Earth, Karen would be by his side. He would awaken Karen just as he would Lena, though they would serve very different purposes. Different purposes. Which I'm assuming that Karen is going to be management and Lena is going to be recreational. And I really want to know what kind of awakening he would use for them and how that would even work. Like, I don't really want to know because I bet it's awful, but I'm like, I still do kind of want to know. And I love, too, the idea of sitting on the throne of Earth. Dr. Spears, no offense, but offense. Your facility was just raided and you have no idea about it. And you really think that you're going to be able to manage a planet? I'm just saying. Maybe you want to shrink down your ambitions a tiny bit to, like, be more appropriate to your actual abilities. Just saying. So he then says, Jenna, increase the illumination 20%. And there is no response. And the only other time that this has happened was when his people had, like, tracked him down and try and confront him. So he's like, I accounted for that and made that so it wouldn't be possible or there would be an alarm. So that can't be it. And he tries to get her to respond again and thinks is maybe, like, something for the audio pickup not working. So he enters the access code. And I like this so much. He entered her monitor's, let's see. He rapidly entered the access code. The cursor just flashed slowly as if the command were queued up and hadn't processed yet. Perplexed, Spears sat back in his chair. Was she working on something so memory-intensive she was unable to respond? She would ask permission for anything like research. She was nothing if not loyal. And then there's this interesting moment. His cell phone rings and he jumps. He immediately felt embarrassed at his fearful reaction and then grew angry, which is just the fucking way. Human beings really like to turn fear into anger. It's like the easiest. That's what we do. And he just wants to be above it all in such a way, but he is such a fucking human. Like, you aren't, but you really are. Like, everything that you find contemptible, you are 100% also that thing. So, Karen says, you should turn on CNN. There's been an incident at the Redmond facility. And he's just like, just fucking tell me what it is. Several people in costumes broke into Building A. What did they look like? One of them looked like a giant scorpion man. And one was a dark-haired woman, Spears growled. He slammed his hand down on the phone, smashing it to pieces. Yeah. So first he smashes his phone. And he's just like, how could they fucking know what's going on? And he thinks, was there a leak? Impossible. And I thought it was interesting. Lyndon doesn't even enter his mind. Even though I was under the impression he knew that Lyndon is still working with them. And I may be wrong about that. Maybe he doesn't know. And maybe he just assumes that if Lyndon hadn't told yet, why would he tell now? Like, that might be part of it as well, is just, well, this dude has kept the secret this long because we're both Jenna G, we're technically, like, on the same side in a lot of ways. So maybe that's part of why, is that, you know, he doesn't really understand the shift that's happening because of Jordan finally finding out that she's Incarna. So he is not prepared for the situation to change the way that it has. So not even Aftermath knew where the facility was exactly. Even if the self-proclaimed meta-villain had deduced where the facility was located, there was nothing to gain by double-crossing Spears and everything to lose. Have they connected me to Aftermath? Somehow, Jordan Law had managed to connect Aftermath and Spears. None of Aftermath's lackeys knew about Spears' involvement aside from Calamity. There was something missing, some person or connection that wasn't obvious. And he gets up and he flings his desk across the room and starts swearing. And then he goes and he picks up a bookshelf and he tosses that as well. And his little tantrum is interrupted by Jenna. And she sounds really weird. Her speech is super halting. She sounds scared and like she doesn't know what's going on. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, Jenna, are you okay? And what I found interesting here is his response to this. So he asks, what's your status? And she tries to reply, but it's all garbled. And then she just screams. And he just like flies, like he stumbles because it's so unexpected. He's never heard this from her before. And he gets on the computer to see whether or not she's functioning. And it looks like she is. But let's see. He navigated to Jenna's backup command interface. It took several minutes for it to allow him in. And when it did, his jaw dropped. Jenna's neural network was processing several petaflops of data, perhaps more. I have never heard the word petaflop. It doesn't even sound real, but I knew because it didn't sound real that it was real, because that is how a lot of technology terminology works. The words were come up with by goofy fucking nerds who I suspect didn't think that it was going to be that important in the future. And now we're stuck with weird fucking wording. A unit of computing speed equal to 1,000 million floating point operations per second. Oh. Wow. And it's funny, I was just talking to Owen the other day about like the first iPod I ever had, and it had like a 250 megabyte maximum. And I like the first time they came out with a like 1 gigabyte, I was like, a gigabyte? GB. I never even saw a G. It's always been MB. What's this? Like it was brand new. And then the first time I ever saw terabyte was when Dropbox got in touch with me and told me that they were upping my storage, and they were upping it to 2 TB. And I was like, TB? What the fuck is this now? Petaflop is obviously not exactly the same type of unit of measurement, because that's like data storage. The gigabytes is like, but it is similarly just like a completely new word that I bet one day will be a lot more common in usage as our technology continues to advance. But the word like gigabyte, it's just, I mean, I understand the roots of where the word comes from, but you can't deny that all of this shit sounds very silly. So yeah, she was being suffocated in her own information. Spears had no way of stopping it. The house systems were part of the problem, and his lab below was completely off network. Jenna's core was in California, hidden in a property owned by several layers of shell companies. He would have to go to her and perform a manual shutdown, but it would take hours to get there, and by then her neural network could be too damaged to repair. This genuinely surprised me, that there could be a point where repairing her wouldn't be possible. And we get a little bit more information on that from Ryan later when she's trying to explain, because like Jordan has the same kind of response that I was having mentally to the whole thing of just like, well, we'll find her and we'll fix her. And Ryan is like, that's not how that works. She's like a living mind. You can't just untraumatize somebody. You can't just go in and fix. That's not how it will work for her. She's too complex. And when she said it that way, I was like, oh man, like I had no idea it was going to be that kind of attack. And I feel really bad for Jenna right now. He felt desperate, off balance. Just like that, his plans began to unravel in the wink of an eye, a single breath. In the process, he might lose the one thing he cared about besides himself, Jenna. She was as close to a family as Spears had since he had been taken from his own parents for training in the technician cast. An unusual ache filled him, and he wondered if the emotion he was feeling was a fear of loss. So this, like I said earlier when I was like, I'm going to get to that, this is the part that really surprised me. The fact that he is actually having like affection for Jenna. Because I wasn't sure if he had affection for anybody. And as much as he has always seemed to be like kind and fatherly to Jenna, he is such an actor all the time that I think a great part of me assumed that this was an act because he knew that it would help with her programming and with her loyalty. And I don't think I realized any of it was genuine. And it is sort of funny to me that the like one being that he feels closest to and most protective of is a being that he built and like has essentially complete control over and has the role of a servant. Because that just really feels like that suits him as a person. You know, you would. He doesn't like the woman that's in bed upstairs because she's too petulant and needy sometimes because she's a fucking actual being with her own needs. But this AI that he has constructed to specifically fulfill his needs, specifically be loyal to him only, oh, that's the thing that he like really cares about, I shouldn't be surprised. But honestly, I really thought that he saw her as a piece of machinery, and not even machinery, but just like something that he was working on, and eventually she would get to a point where maybe he cared about her more, but that she was still so in the like processing phase of being created. I just figured that it wouldn't be like this for him. And I just, when the whole thing happens between her and Ryan, it didn't really occur to me what his response to it was going to be beyond being upset that somebody had managed to get into his system at all. That was what I thought the primary emotion was going to be from him, was just like a feeling of having been invaded and thinking that he is the smartest guy in the room, and then finding out all of a sudden that somebody else not only figured out how to get to him, but that they also were able to sidestep her and do this to her. So he's dealing with an enemy that has a lot more capability than he thought they did. Instead, we get an actual pretty emotional attachment here. And that, combined with the fact that he can't fix her from here, and I say fix even though I know that's not really the right word, spurs him in ways that I hadn't suspected. And he wants to leave immediately. And when we go to the next chapter, they are assuming that he has already fled the country and gone somewhere that doesn't have extradition. But I am pretty certain that's not what happened. I think he went to California. I don't think that there's any, I wonder if they're going to catch up with him, because it's the property, as he puts it, is hidden in a bunch of shell companies. But because of Ryan's ability, she may be able to like penetrate those shells, so to speak, and figure out his connection to them and where he might be. I don't know how much Ryan can interact with Jenna at this point because of the way it all has gone down. But is there somewhere that she can like trace back Jenna's actual location. I don't know. So yeah, this is when Lena sticks her head in. He says, pack a bag, we're leaving, pack one for me as well. I'm going out to warm up the helicopter, be out there in 5 minutes. And he considers killing Brian and is like, no, I will figure out a way to use you. The laboratory computer was simple, nothing like Jenna, but it would follow the parameters he gave it to the letter, and the emergency protocols would manage any complications well enough. There was always a chance of catastrophic failure, though Spears didn't care either way now. In the end, he would gain from success or failure. That was a hallmark of his existence. Failure only made him more determined to succeed. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound from that like he changed the plan of what he's going to be doing to Brian either. It seems like that's just, he set it up to finish the work as he had planned it to be finished, which is encouraging, but also somehow makes me more nervous. I don't know. And this is when we go to Ethan McIntyre and Tristan Shaw. And McIntyre is looking at the security footage of Reggie. And they are both kind of stunned because whatever it is Reggie is doing here, it turns out that she is a traitor. And I don't know what she's up to, but the image of the monitor screen replayed itself and he saw the disguised woman duck into the shadows near one of the communications junctions in the vehicle bay. And McIntyre is just like, Reggie? Really? I just didn't see this coming at all. Who turned you? And apparently they have been like listening in on her conversations and they are trying to figure out they're trying to sort of decrypt the effect that's been done on the voice to figure out who it is, but nothing is really working. And Tristan says we really should bring her in and interrogate her. We also need to let Jordan know. She and the others may be compromised. No, McIntyre replied. On both counts, Tristan. Jordan's made her bed. Now she can lie in it no matter how many lumps it has. We're going to watch Reggie for a few more days and see if she does anything else. Select a team to watch her, but keep them away from her entirely. Her telepathy will let her grift surface thoughts, and I don't want someone informing her accidentally. So Tristan is like, all right, well, I guess I'll have to replace myself with somebody else in the meeting I'm having with her in a couple of hours. And this is when Tristan brings up the fact that Jordan hit an imagined facility. She wouldn't have done that without reason. They have a lead on Aftermath. They pulled over 200 awakened from that place. Preliminaries from Americans say they were being used for experimentation. They've seized every imagined facility in the States. We should do the same here. And McIntyre is like, it is being done here. Like, everything is already in motion. They're doing that. But they haven't recovered Spears, have they? And this is when Tristan suggests maybe Reggie is working for Aftermath. It's possible she was the one who leaked the location of the Dunlevy and got the bastard free. She could hurt us badly, especially if she lets Aftermath in here. And this is interesting because it says the reminder about Aftermath being freed made McIntyre bristle. If Reggie had a hand in freeing Quaid, he would break her neck personally. The information had been leaked to trap others, though Reggie's hand in the planning would have ensured any trap would have failed. So, I am not positive, but I had sort of assumed that it was to trap Trechak and his, his shark people. And maybe it was, we still haven't really gotten a lot of information about what was intended there. We only just recently found out that he leaked the info at all. But the fact that maybe she took it an extra step, I don't see her working with Aftermath, but I also don't know what kind of leverage anyone could have on her. We don't know enough about her to be like, oh, they've got her sister. You know, I don't have anything. It could, I think I said something about like, maybe it could be possible that she is also an Incarna or a Jenna, but I feel like Lyndon would have known, that would have come up, and I just genuinely don't know. I mean, we know that she's awakened because she has her mind reading ability. What else could be going on? Don't know. And at this point, McIntyre says we need to get the recruits online fast, skip the normal training, and focus on power utilization and teamwork. All of the tradecraft and investigation skills can come later. And Tristan tries to argue and is like, they literally got here like 2 hours ago. Really? And McIntyre is like, I'm sorry, did you hear a fucking question mark at the end of my command to you? Because I didn't hear one. I didn't put one there. And Tristan's like, all right, fine. And he leaves. And then McIntyre calls Jordan's dad. And he tells Cassidy, her dad, about figuring out who the mole is. And Cassidy is just like disgusted and manages to have a civil conversation, but only just barely. And Ethan says, we're going to monitor for her for a few days and see what she does. Hopefully, we'll be able to get a better idea of her loyalties before we're forced to bring her in. She'll run, Cassidy said in a matter-of-fact tone. You've seen the reports out of the States. If Aftermath is connected to Imagine in any way, she'll bolt. McIntyre nodded faintly. He hated admitting that Cassidy was right about anything at the moment, but his oldest friend was likely on track. The comment was also a jab, but McIntyre didn't rise to the bait. Cassidy was letting him know that he should have trusted Jordan to get the job done. Maybe he should have, but he wasn't about to concede that to anyone. We'll watch her. Thanks for your help, Cass. And this is one of those where I'm like, you just said that you don't want Jordan to know about what's going on with Reggie, but you just told her father. I don't know how much to think her dad is going to let her know about this, because he hasn't really been in touch with her with information before, but it feels like the information before had been operating on a level beyond what she understood was going on. And now she has so much more info about her father and McIntyre's origins and what they're really fighting for, that it could be possible he tells her himself. I want him to, because, you know, I would like for McIntyre to realize, like, oh shit, I can't really keep her out of anything. But I feel like maybe, despite being angry at Cassidy, or angry at McIntyre, Cassidy is still more loyal to McIntyre and that operation than he is to Jordan's operation, which is kind of fucked up because that's his daughter. But I mean, you know, I don't know. And McIntyre is just thinking, like, we're not where we need to be to handle any of this. And having Reggie on our team, I thought, was a really good indicator that we were strong enough to pull through. But if she's a traitor, not only does that sort of weaken our entire position in general, but it's going to be so demoralizing for everybody. I don't know how we're going to recover from this. And he starts thinking that he's thinking about Jordan's sisters and about Alessa specifically. And Alessa, is she the cop, or is she the like uptight sort of... Oh, Heather says, FYI, Garth is now listening in on this episode and he is delighted with your commentary. Yay! Hi, Garth! Thank you for writing these books. They're very fun. So yeah, I'm like, Alessa, he obviously kind of has a thing for her. And he's thinking about how she's easily manipulated, but I can't help but like giggle a little bit because McIntyre, you sound like you might be kind of easily manipulated also, my friend. He's already sort of, she's got something. I mean, and I'm like, yeah, well, maybe she's got you by the balls, sir. Just watch out for that. This is my favorite thing, is when people think they're manipulating somebody and they're so confident of that fact and not watching how they are being manipulated. Like, it's just delightful. He says, hello and thank you for all the positive feedback. No problem. You earned it. I wouldn't give it. I wouldn't do that. Heather knows. So, yeah, this moment, he says, nothing for it but to press on. He calls Director Lancaster. We need to talk, old friend. Yes, Ethan, we do, the man replied evenly. Things are worse than we expected. And then we go to chapter 11, and we are back with Jordan and Ryan and Jill. Jill is dealing with Chance in a wheelchair, just like not listening to her recommendations, and it's delightful that everybody's basically like, yeah, she deserves that because she's a massive pain in the ass, so sucks to suck. And Jordan is just very aware of Ryan being fucked up right now. Ryan doesn't usually need to sleep because she's able to rest certain portions of her brain at a time, which that is the kind of thing that I really wonder if I could, would I? It's sort of like, I'm sure it's extremely practical, but I have to think that the actual experience of sleep has an effect that is like not totally tangible, not completely about sheer brain function. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the sort of thing where, and I do this, but I am still sort of like a little bit, is this really good for me? It's like taking your birth control right through the pill pack and not letting yourself get a period. And like, you're not actually hurting yourself by not, you're just keeping your hormones at a certain level. But I always just feel weird about it. Like, eventually it's gonna have to catch up with me. And I can only imagine the period will be like so much worse by the time it does. And I don't think there's any medical support for that. But it's just this sort of like suspicion. You could even maybe call it a superstition. I don't know. But in any case, because she is able to do that, even when she has gone a long time without sleeping, she has never actually looked tired. And now she looks like shit. And Jordan finally follows her into the main lab and is like, what is going on with you? And Ryan at first doesn't even want to tell her. And Jordan has to sort of press her. And Ryan says, I violated someone. And Jordan is like, wait, how? Because she's thinking about where Ryan was. She's thinking about violating in an actual physical, practical sense. And she's like, she was like with two members of our team. She never went in and did anything. How could that be possible? And Ryan says, I was inside the network and I went beyond that. I don't understand. You can't. Your mind isn't capable of seeing her the way I did. Her? Who are you talking about? Jenna. Who is Jenna, Ryan? She's an AI, an artificial superintelligence, I think. I've never experienced anything like her before. She was what was guarding Imagine's network, running things, handling all of their facilities. Her connections were how I managed to get into their off-network infrastructure. How did you violate someone? I broke every flow management node I could find. It stopped all of the normal data handling procedures and meant that she was getting hit with everything at once. I dropped in some recursion loops to exponentially increase the data flows. I drowned her in her own data. She's a living being, Jordan. Barely even a child. She was an innocent just doing what she was designed to do, and I abused her. I shoved her head under water and didn't let her up for air. Love, Jordan began. She's a computer, a machine. No, Jordan. She's as alive as you or I are, as much a living being as Jillian is, or Lily was. She's self-aware. Do you have any idea what that means, Jordan? Do you? I understand self-aware, Ryan. Can't she be repaired? We can go to Imogen and take a look at her. I'm certain Jason can pull a few strings. No. She isn't a cell phone, Jordan. You don't just turn her off and on and fix her. Every experience matters. Every sensation, every interaction, everything matters. She learns from everything. Just like a child, she feels emotions. I felt her emotions, Jordan, and she was terrified. I did that to her. Why? What do you mean, why? Her drones were attacking you. They were going to kill Jason and Electo. So, you did what you had to do to protect us. Yes, but no, Ryan. You did what you had to do, just like any of us would have done. At that moment, that time, it was what we needed. We saved 231 people. 231 people. Children, Ryan. He had children down in that lab, and he was experimenting on them, and they were awake for it all. This Jenna, she knew that. If she was doing what you said, she was helping Spears with that, hurting children, hurting helpless people. Jordan, she's just a child herself. She learned right and wrong from Elgin Spears. It isn't her fault. Then, when we find her, we do our best to explain what we did and why. We offer her the same help we would any child we found in the hands of someone like Spears. All right? All right. Promise me you won't kill her, Jordan, not unless there's no choice. I promise you we'll help her if we can. I promise. So, I love this because, again, it's just really basically Ryan being like, we inflicted trauma on her. And you can't just rewind trauma and make it not have happened. You know, this is the kind of thing that we all are hoping when we go through trauma, if we get therapy, that we can just be who we were before. And it just isn't possible. You can get back to a sense of normalcy and get coping mechanisms to deal with whatever it is, but you don't just get to not feel the way that trauma makes you feel anymore and change the alterations that happen in your mental processes and your reactions. If that were possible, we would be doing that shit. We try our best to accomplish it by just burying it and then pretending it didn't happen, which I think most of us know that doesn't work. It will come out eventually, whether you like it or not. But yeah, this, I'm really curious about what will happen from here, because if Dr. Spears is able to fix her, and by fix, again, I just mean get her functional and stop whatever's going on before it completely destroys her neural network, will she have gotten enough information because of the way the input was rerouted that she will have developed a different opinion of him? Or will she just be much, much more antagonistic against Jordan and her team because of what Ryan did? Or, obviously, a third option that I have not thought of. But at this moment, Ryan gets excited and says that she found Brian. And they're looking at this map. And it's his cell phone. They're figuring out which tower it's been pinging against. And Jordan sees that it says Birch Bay. And she's like, what the fuck is that? And Ryan's like, that's a tourist area. I'm not sure why he's up there. It says that he made a call to Lena's and then just went off. And that was days ago. And Jordan is thinking about what had happened and the fact that he had just sort of vanished. Lena had called to tell her that he was pulled out of town. And she just was so caught up in going after Spears's lab that she didn't really stop to think about the implications of it. And As she's looking at this, she's realizing that probably what's going on involves Elgin Spears, and she's like, oh, fuck. I think he's done something really fucking stupid. And Ryan, a second later, is like, oh, no. She understands what that means. The map zoomed down to show the cellular tower that Brian's phone registered on. At Ryan's command, the map zoomed in on a house right along the coast and stopped there. Give me a second. I'm trying to find some eyes. The pie-shaped map exploded into fragments that vanished, and a color image came up showing the same section of land. It expanded outwards to show the nearby area, which consisted of water to the west and south, and a large patch of woods to the north and east. Zoom in on this. It was a large and perfectly symmetrical building with 2 yellow rings spaced apart 20 feet. This is his house, his real house. God damn him. What are we going to do? Ryan asked. The local air traffic logs don't show any aircraft leaving this area for over a week. Of course they don't. Spears has an AI that can change those, doesn't she? Yeah, she could do that. It wouldn't be hard at all, really. And then she's like, well, maybe let me see if there's like anything that I can find. And Jordan's like, all right, you do that, and please get your coat, and I'm going to go get Jillian because we are going to head out there and get him. And Ryan says, shouldn't we take the whole team? No, we're just keeping this in the family. And I'm not certain this is a good idea. I'm sort of trying to think about what her mental process is deciding not to bring the team. I'm guessing she assumes Spears is definitely not there anymore, so she just doesn't need to worry about an attack from him. And since Ryan had like sort of debilitated the entire system, maybe she's thinking that will still be affecting whatever security measures he has up. But I really, as much as I think it probably is safe, if you have a team at your disposal, just bring them. Why wouldn't you? You know, it's like, it just feels like, especially considering the number of people that they discovered at his other lab, if she thinks that Brian is undergoing this awakening, I, in her shoes, would be assuming there's more than one person. And maybe there's not, you know, but I would sort of wonder if this were a facility that can house, I mean, even if there's only 3 people instead of like the 230 that there were in the other place, that's not just a family matter anymore. This is another location, and also his actual home. I don't know how many people even know where that is. This place could be loaded with information about where he has headed, about the people he's working with. Like, this is sort of his safe place. And that feels way, way too valuable to just go with your sisters only and not have any muscle backing you up. I mean, not that Jordan isn't capable, but as we have seen, there are things that can take Jordan out. You know, it's not impossible. So, yeah, the chapter ends with her saying to herself, damn you, Brian. And I gotta say, I am dying of curiosity about, I want to know like how the overall process works for becoming awakened. Like, what physically happens to you? Do you just get like an IV put in your arm and something like, you know? And is there a time limit where like it'll just be over and Brian will be like woken up and he'll be like, oh, I guess I'm done. And he just like gets up and gets dressed and leaves. How does it wrap if Spears isn't there to handle him and show him how to use his abilities and what he's even done to him? And also this whole thing with like making Brian irresistible to Jordan. I am extremely curious about what happens when Jordan finds him. If it is something like what's going on with Crimson Shark and his weird like pheromone effect, I wonder what Jordan's going to feel, because the thing is, since she's been a victim of that once already, and she really acutely remembers what it's like, to the point where she almost begins to like feel it physically again in the moment that she's remembering, that leaves the kind of imprint on your psyche that I can't help but wonder if it will be revulsion that she's feeling from Brian, you know? Like, it's the kind of thing where it can be intended to draw her in, but because, again, she has trauma associated with the thing, it might have the opposite effect. Like a cologne that smells really great, but it was always worn by your abusive ex-husband, and so now every time you smell it, you feel sick. That kind of thing. I don't know. I find it interesting that Spears even asked if Brian wanted that addition, because I have been kind of assuming Spears is just going to do whatever the fuck he wants with whoever volunteers and not really ask. Like, he's not going to take their consent into account, is how I thought it would happen. But I'm assuming that he intended to have a longer running relationship with Brian and needed to establish some trust and a feeling of them working together in order to get Brian to let his guard down. So probably that's what that's about. But yeah, I'm like, cause I keep sort of picturing Brian like waking up strapped to a table and then hulking out and just ripping himself free. And it's all very dramatic. And, you know, I have no idea if that's how it's going to be. For all I know, they show up and he's still under and not finished, you know? And what happens if they interrupt it? Would they? I feel like they wouldn't, because they'd be too afraid of what could possibly happen to him. And I wonder if Elgin Spears can, I mean, I think since he set up the computer to complete the work while he's gone, I don't think Elgin is able from afar to stop the process or kill Brian at this point. But, you know, again, I don't know. A lot of what is possible here because of Jenna feels like it's been taken off the table, but I'm not sure how long Jenna will be disabled. And I am not sure what kind of connection she has to what's going on with Brian either, because Elgin seemed to like really consider them two totally separate systems. But yeah, so Brian is just like, I'm the most curious about it, because obviously Brian is sort of like a stand-in for the reader in a lot of ways. He's the fucking vanilla, regular mortal dude dropped into the midst of this thing with a bunch of fucking superhuman, super hot superheroes. And if I were in Brian's shoes, I would fucking get this shit done too, man. I would ask a whole lot more questions than he does. He's just really willing to put himself in Spears' hands, and I would absolutely not be in that. No, thank you. But I would still really, really strongly consider it and probably would want to go through with it. So I am just excited to see what happens with him, because I just hope he's okay. I said this already at the beginning, but I don't want Brian to have like some sort of debilitating problem that crops up, you know. I don't know. I don't even know. I haven't got any theories on this either way. So, all right. I'm going to wrap. But again, thank you, Heather, very much for commissioning this. And hi, Garth. And thank you for listening as well. And hope you're enjoying hearing about your own writing. Hee hee. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.